Hey friends, welcome back to the channel. So it seems like forever since I filmed a video. I did take a little bit of a break because I had a sinus infection, and you guys don't need to hear me like coughing and stuff like that through videos. So this one has been a little bit of a long time coming. So this is our 500 subscriber Q&A, and I couldn't be happier to see this channel growing. It's not about the subscribers, of course. It's about the books, but I just love that this little niche interest that we all have in just horror literature just continues to grow, and we have such an amazing community. So one thing that I did want to bring up, because it's really kind of grating on my nerves, and then we'll get into the questions. When I went into the video that I put out that I was asking for you guys to submit your questions, I noticed that YouTube has now started putting ads at the beginning of my videos, which I find a little bit annoying because my channel is not monetized. I don't have over 1,000 subscribers, and I don't have the watch hours either yet. So that kind of grates on my nerves a little bit because I'm not allowed to make any kind of compensation off of my videos, so it's kind of annoying that YouTube is now making compensation off my videos and I get nothing out of it. So I don't know what you guys think. I know there's a couple of other channels that this has happened to as well. Let me know down in the comments, what do you guys think about this? You know, if the channel is not monetized by the creator, do you think YouTube should be allowed to put ads on there? I don't know. You guys let me know. But that's enough about that. We're gonna get into the questions. So I have my Mr. Skeleton wine glass, and this is cranberry juice, of course, because I don't drink alcohol. And I also put out a call for questions on Instagram. So if you guys aren't following me on Instagram, I'll leave my handle and everything down below, and you can go check me out over there as well. So getting right into the questions, starting with the Instagram ones, like I said, the first one was asked by Iron Reign of Books, and they asked your favorite vampire book. And this is going to kind of loop into the next question as well. So without a doubt, my favorite vampire book is always going to be Dracula. And I know that's very, very basic, but I was thinking about it and I just can't think of anything else that I would want to answer with. Because Dracula, I specifically remember going into, it wasn't Chapters at the time, we also had a bookstore here in Canada that was called Kohl's in the 90s, and I remember my mom bringing me in and buying me a copy of Dracula when I was, I believe, 12 or 13. I was in about grade 7. And I absolutely fell in love with the book. I loved the writing, I loved the writing style. I think it was probably my first sort of introduction to Gothic literature, and I just ate it up. I loved it so, so much. And I remember we rented out Bram Stoker's Dracula, and I watched that movie over and over. So just, I think it's the nostalgia as well for me, because it was during a time when, you know, I was still a developing reader, and I believe it was shortly before or shortly after that that I had read Interview with the Vampire as well by Anne Rice, and a few other of Anne Rice's books, and I, you know, just devoured her books at the time as well because I was an angsty teenager. But it's always, always going to be Dracula, and I have an undying love for sort of the traditional idea of a vampire. I did read the Twilight books and stuff like that as well, and although I kind of like that certain writers will try to put a different spin on the idea of a vampire, the whole sparkly thing, vegetarian, just wasn't my cup of tea. Like I said, did read them, but it's just not my shtick. I'm very, very traditionalist when it comes to vampires. And of course, besides that, I'm a huge Buffy the Vampire Slayer fan as well. I would love to do some Buffy themed videos if you guys are up for it. Let me know down in the comments if you would be interested in that at all. So that kind of wraps into the next question that was asked by my friend Merce from Harpies in the Trees, and she asks, if there was one character from a horror film that you could fuse with Dead Space kind of way, who would it be? And I picked Dracula for this question as well, because just the gothic opulence and everything, the atmosphere and just everything that goes into the story of Dracula, I think I would definitely want to fuse with that sort of character. You know, that classic kind of villain, and he's very romantic, and just that whole sort of atmosphere and style I absolutely love. And then wrapping in with Buffy at the same time, there is an episode that's Buffy versus Dracula, which is one of my favorite episodes. I think it's fantastic. So I mean, if I'm gonna be killed by anybody, I think I'd want it to be Buffy. And then the next question, Lady of Thrills asks, top 3 paranormal book recommendations. And this one is a little bit hard because the term paranormal is sort of a very wide term, and there's a lot of kind of subgenres within paranormal. But I think I'm gonna go with these ones. So the first I would have to pick is Christopher Pike's Witch. That was one of my favorite books when I was a kid growing up. And of course it follows a girl who is a natural witch, and she comes from a line of natural witches, and the whole story of her being a witch is kind of wrapped into this contemporary world, you know, where she's going to high school and they deal with all sorts of contemporary problems that teenagers dealt with in the 90s. But I think I'm gonna go with that one because, you know, has to do with witches, and it really sticks out in my mind. So the second one I'd have to go with is actually a series. So this is the Last Apprentice series, or it's also known as the Spooks Apprentice, I believe, in the UK, by Joseph Delaney. And this whole series is just fantastic. And if you're into like supernatural and paranormal sort of ghosts and monsters and that sort of thing, it has a really wide range of those sorts of beings, and the whole adventure is just fantastic. So as most of you guys probably already know, I am rereading that series this year, and I'm absolutely loving it. It's a middle grade series, but I have to say that a lot of the elements that it deals with, it can get quite gruesome. So I would have to put that one in here. And I wanted to pick something that I also read specifically this year. And so I picked Don't Tell a Soul by Kirsten Miller. And that has a fantastic sort of ghost story that's wrapped in with a mystery, and it's really adventurous. And I have to tell you, I couldn't put that book down. It definitely doesn't get enough recognition, and I think if you're into anything supernatural or paranormal, definitely pick up Don't Tell a Soul by Kirsten Miller. And the next question, Ghoulies Can Read asks a very polarizing question. So Coca-Cola or Pepsi? And I am a pop drinker, and I think everybody has very strong opinions on which side of the fence that they're on. And for me, I am definitely on the side of Pepsi. I hate Coke, I hate Coca-Cola products. They just taste very weird to me. So definitely Pepsi, more specifically Diet Pepsi, which I used to drink a lot of, like an embarrassing amount of Diet Pepsi. I would drink several cans worth every single day, and on the weekends it was even worse. So I knew that it wasn't good for my health, and it, you know, just with age and stuff like that, it started really hurting my belly, and it took me a really long time. And now I usually have just one on the weekend, like a can, and that's only if we're having like a takeout kind of meal or whatever, because I found that since I cut it out like almost completely, the aspartame does contribute to my migraines now. So I try not to drink it, and I have to say, for the most part, I don't even crave it anymore. So really happy that I've mostly cut that out of my life, because it's just all chemicals, so nobody needs that. I'm gonna stick with my cranberry juice. Oh, and Ghoulies Can Read also asked a second question. What is your spirit animal? And I actually found out during a Reiki session that I was having, if you've never had Reiki, it is absolutely wonderful, that my spirit animal is actually a cat, which I find hilarious because I am not a cat person whatsoever. I am totally a dog person. Cats make me very kind of nervous. I don't know what it is. I've met some very mean cats in my time, and so I thought that was kind of funny, but maybe because my soul and my aura is very cat-like that I don't get along with most other cats. Who knows? But that's what I was told once during a Reiki session. And my very good friend Marissa from Spooky Syllables asks, thoughts on controversial Halloween candy? For example, raisins, candy corn, that sort of thing. So I don't think anyone enjoys getting raisins in their bag. I love raisins. I'm all for them at any other time of the year, but I don't get putting it in like a kid's candy bag. You know, just give them the Snickers. Just leave the raisins out of it because they're not gonna eat them. They're just gonna chuck them. But I don't know. Let me know what you guys think. Do you give out raisins during Halloween time? As for candy corn, now I've only ever tried candy corn like recently within the past 5-6 years. It wasn't really a big thing when I was growing up. And I'm kind of on the fence about it, I have to say. It's very strange. And I think it kind of depends on the brand that you get as well, with, you know, if it tastes right or if it tastes plasticky, because I've had some very plasticky candy corn, but it's one of those things that it's like when you eat it, you're like, this is weird, but you can't stop eating it. So that's my experience with candy corn. So still on the fence with that one. I can't really give you guys a straight answer. And then there's another candy that we always used to get as kids, and it came in this wax paper, this orange and black and white wax paper with witches on it, and it was like, they were like molasses chews. It was like taffy, but it was made out of molasses. And it's funny because I used to hate those things as a kid, and everybody gave them out. Like, I would end up with so many of those. But when I got older, I actually really started to enjoy them. And you can still get them. They're scarce. I think this year I only saw them at Canadian Tire. If I can find a picture, I'll insert it here. So let me know if you guys know about that molasses candy. Is that a weird Canadian thing, or do they have that everywhere? And then I also have two questions, and I'm not sure how to pronounce this. It's either Angebane or Angbane. And their first question is, have you had any paranormal experiences recently? And yes, funny enough, the Friday before Halloween, we had a little kind of virtual Halloween party with work, just with my team members, and it was really fun. They gave us a skip the dishes gift card, so we all got lunch together, and they got like cookie kits, like cookie decorating kits for people, and I told ghost stories the whole time. So everything that was in Tales from the Haunted Victorian, I told during this virtual Halloween party that we had. So we had a lot of fun, but it was funny because the entire time that I was telling the stories, both of my dogs were going absolutely rank upstairs, and they weren't like barking at anything, like they weren't barking out the window. They were literally running around the house barking, like going upstairs and barking at stuff. And my girl, Callie, I mean, she was shaking. She didn't know what to do with herself. And as soon as I stopped telling the stories, they completely stopped acting weird. So I'm not sure if I was attracting something. Like I said, sometimes when I do tell those stories, weird things tend to happen. I did explain that when I was filming one night, I was telling stories. I can't remember which portion of the story I was telling, but my camera started having all kinds of problems, and we had creepy things going on upstairs as well. And then there was the story back when I was in junior high, and we had some ghostly activity going on in the phone when I was talking to a friend. So it seems like whenever I tell those stories, like something weird happens, and I can't piece it together. I don't know what's going on. But if a dog is barking, typically they're barking like out the window at something, but they were just running around the house barking at absolutely nothing. So that was the most recent experience that I had. And also, you guys know that I had my husband on the channel a couple of videos back. He picked out books for me to read in November, and some of you noticed that he has a white eyebrow, and there's kind of a little bit of a spooky story behind that. So on one side, Matthew has one eyebrow that's completely white, and you probably couldn't see it, but the skin around that eye is completely white, so it's like albino. His eyelashes are white, and he has some white flecks in his hair and in his beard as well. And so when he lost the pigmentation when he was 14 years old, he went to the doctor and the doctor said, well, you know, sometimes people just lose pigmentation. There's nothing really behind it. And Matt told him the story of what had happened the weekend previous, and the doctor didn't make any sort of connection. So what happened was Matt was out fishing with his dad and his uncle, I believe. And like I said, it was way back when he was 14 years old. And they had a storm that was kind of rolling in. And you know how you can kind of feel the atmosphere changing and things are starting to get dark. So they were kind of talking about, okay, like it's time to go in. And Matt had his fishing line out in the water, and they actually experienced St. Elmo's fire. So Matt had all of these kind of sparkly lights with the electricity in the air around the top of his fishing pole. And all three of them saw it. It was crazy. So he wound up his line, they went back in, and within several days he lost the pigmentation on one side. I kind of wish it had been like all of his hair and stuff. I think that would have been crazy. But yeah, so one eyebrow, all of the skin on that side, his eyelashes, and parts of his beard and parts of his hair is white because of his experience with St. Elmo's fire, which as far as I know, like I don't know anybody else who's ever experienced it. So I think that's pretty cool. And Matt is also an empath at the same time, and we've both had paranormal experiences throughout our lives. And so I think that's pretty cool. It's actually the first thing that we started talking about when we started talking to each other when we first started dating, was his crazy white eyebrow. So there you go. That's the story behind the mysterious Matthew. Okay, so next I'm going to get into the questions that were asked directly through that YouTube video. So first was Kathy K asks a couple of questions actually. She says, I know you're Canadian like myself, and I guess I have a few questions. When did you first seriously get into horror? Do you love any genres just as much? Who is your favorite author? And what's your day job? So starting at the beginning, when did you seriously get into horror? And I was really young. I mean, I read the Goosebumps books when they came out in the 90s, so I was probably 10 when they came out. But even previously to that, of course, I heard the stories about what was happening in my house because I grew up in a haunted house. And I was super interested in all of that. And of course, I saw ghost children when I was growing up, when I was really young, and they didn't scare me. I was just kind of really curious. And I remember there was a show that used to come on. It was called In Search Of, and it was narrated by Leonard Nimoy. And it's kind of like a Unsolved Mysteries sort of situation where they talk about things that mysteriously happened. People had experiences with the Grim Reaper. They talked about the ghost ships like the Mary Celeste, Screaming Skulls, ghosts. They had Hans Holzer on the show, which was my first experience learning about Hans Holzer, and he was kind of the pioneer sort of paranormal investigator. And so I was really interested in that sort of thing. And then, just like a lot of other people on YouTube, one of my first scary stories that I had been read was way back when I was in like grade 1. And it was about, it was in one of those little readers. And it was the girl with the green ribbon around her neck. And of course, you know, she takes the green ribbon off and her head falls off. And my poor mother was terrified because she thought I was going to be like scared. And it just sticks in my head that I was just absolutely fascinated with these scary stories, both with what I was seeing on TV and then, you know, reading books like that. And then when I was in grade 4, my mom was actually my teacher in grade 4, and Halloween of that year, she played the audiobook of Scary Stories to Tell in the Dark, and I fell in love with it. I knew all of the stories by heart. I listened to it over and over and over. So it started out like really young with you know, watching ghost stories and unsolved kind of mysteries and paranormal stuff on TV, and then into the Goosebumps, and then into the R.L. Stine, and then, like I said, with the Anne Rice and Dracula, and I just took off from there. And my parents were really only concerned with the fact that I was reading. They really didn't care what I was reading, as long as, you know, obviously it wasn't scaring me too bad and it wasn't too graphic, which I was reading a lot of books, I think, that they didn't know how graphic they actually were. But I just gobbled it up. I absolutely loved it. And of course, I was a total outcast when I was growing up. I had a lot of bullying. I was always the weird one. No one really was into the same kinds of things that I was into. And so it's just, that's been kind of like my whole life, right from I was 6 years old right up on through. I was the weird one that was into the ghost stories and stuff like that. So yeah, super, super young when I got into horror. And the next question, do you love any genres just as much? And probably not just as much, but I do enjoy, of course, the horror adjacent genres, so like thrillers and mysteries and stuff like that. And I'm really not into like contemporary and stuff like that. I don't like romance. I despise romance. I have no time for it whatsoever. Probably because most of the storylines are very unrealistic, and most romance, whether it's a movie or a book, follows like a pretty specific formula, and once you read it once, you've read them all, kind of thing. And that's just my take on it. I know lots of people who are into romance and contemporary and that kind of stuff. That's just my personal taste, of course. So yeah, anything that's horror adjacent, and I love reading nonfiction if it has to do with paranormal, anything paranormal, or true crime. So I always say that my true loves are ghost stories and true crime. I could read that stuff and watch it on TV for the rest of my life, and I would be a happy person. So that's the answer to that one. Who is your favorite author? And I don't think I really have a favorite author. I've been really exploring authors and their works over the past couple of years, like kind of since just before I started my booktube channel, because I went through a decade-long reading slump, and I've mentioned that a few times before on the channel. And even though I was a reader, like avid reader growing up, when I went through that decade-long slump, I just really got out of everything, and I wasn't really sure who was out there. So definitely getting back into exploring, you know, new authors and stuff like that. But if I had to pick one, I would definitely say Christopher Pike. I did read like the Fear Street and Nightmare Hall and stuff like that, but Christopher Pike books were definitely my favorites when I was younger. And I've told the story many times on the channel that I found his book Witch, which I spoke about in a previous question, at one of my grade 6 book fairs. And I don't know how it ended up in like an elementary school book fair, but I remember picking that book up, and then I had to read all of the rest of them, of course. I don't think I got through the entire collection, but I read quite frequently Christopher Pike when I was growing up. So that's that one. And then she asks, what is your day job? And I work for a large Canadian retailer. Of course, I'm not going to tell you which one, but I'm a marketing manager, and so I have a pretty cushy desk job. I get to work from home. I'm going to continue to work from home, and it's a great company. And whenever anybody new comes into our team, I'm always telling them, you know, it's a challenging company to work for, but a great company to work for. And I think that's the best way that I can describe it. So yep, I work at a desk, but it's for a retail company, so I'm also out at different stores and stuff like that, checking out, making sure everything is okay with the marketing. So for me, I relatively like my job. You know, it can be very, very stressful at times, but no matter what you're doing, you're gonna go through stressful periods. So I am a marketing manager, which I'm sure most people probably wouldn't put me in that role knowing the way that I am. And the next question that we have here, and I gotta say, this one made me tear up a little bit when I read it. So this is from Josh at Working Man Reads, and he asks, my question is, how did you come up with your awesome aesthetic for the channel and your fashion sense? Because in my opinion, it is one of the most original and badass on YouTube. And thank you so much, Josh. That really, really means a lot to me because, you know, like most of us weirdos, we were bullied relentlessly when we were growing up. And if you're different at all, you go through it. And I know most people get bullied, but you know, if you continue to be different, especially into adulthood, that bullying doesn't stop. And unfortunately, I allowed people to bully me, and I tried to go through a period of being normal and all of that, and I was absolutely miserable. And so you know, after a while, especially after I kind of came out of my bipolar diagnosis and all of that kind of thing, I was like, I don't care what anybody else thinks. I am who I am, and this is who I am. Skulls and black and ghost stories and horror and all of those things. So where did I come up with my aesthetic? And I kind of had to think about this for a little while. And I think the first thing is that my parents are both very artistic, and they're very much into, like, you know, being your true self and that sort of thing, especially with my mom, who's also an avid reader. And when I got into kind of my love of Gothic literature, and I love anything that's Victorian, Edwardian, anything like that, which of course a lot of the styles from back then were a lot of lace and different cuts of things, different cuts of garments and that sort of thing. And you know, I don't really agree with the statement, but a lot of people will say to you, like, you were born in the wrong century. And usually if it's somebody like me, like, they'll say that because I'm into everything that's kind of Gothic and Victorian and that sort of thing. So I think I took my love of that kind of period and brought it into the modern day somewhat. And I think it also stems from when I would study like Memento Mori during certain periods, and I think that that's where my love of skulls and skeletons and all of that sort of comes from. And you know, of course I was influenced by growing up in a haunted house. I was influenced by playing in a cemetery when I was a kid. Like, my playground was the cemetery that was across the street. And that particular cemetery, I believe, has graves that are all the way back to the 18th century, like probably the late 18th century. And, you know, I was always kind of taught that things that are macabre or dark or whatever are no different than anybody else's tastes. It's just some people like brightly colored things, some people don't. So I think that's kind of where it started. And then of course you have the Gothic subculture that came up through the 80s and 90s and all of that. And I just grasped onto it. I have to say, like, it was my thing, it was my niche. And although I went through a very, very long period of having that bullied out of me, when people are, you know, saying like, why do you have to be such a grim reaper? Why can't you just be normal? Eventually, you know, you just have to be your true self. And so that's the only way that I can describe where it came from, is probably starting out with a love of things that were Victorian and Gothic, and it just kind of went up through there. So this is authentically me. I know a lot of people are like their personas on YouTube and in Instagram and stuff like that, but this is me. I dress like this every day. I read these books every day. I talk about ghost stories every day. And you know, I'm no different with the people at work than I am with you guys. So this is authentically me. I am very appreciative that I get so many positive comments on my clothing choices and the bookshelves and everything. So thank you guys so much for continuing to support me and my weirdness. And next, Priscilla Bettis, who is always commenting on my videos. I appreciate Priscilla so much. She asks, are you a writer yourself? And yes, I am. I haven't really found a whole lot of time to work writing into my schedule, but I have always loved creative writing and you know, writing poetry and stuff like that. I wrote a lot when I was younger and into my teenage years. I have written a couple of short stories, but I'm working on you know, kind of my grammar and all of that kind of stuff, because it's been a while since I've been in school. I didn't study English or anything like that when I came out. So I'm just working on trying to polish everything up, and eventually I would like to get those short stories published someday, and I would like to write a fictional account based on the ghost stories of when I was growing up. I would like to turn that into a fiction book, and I have lots of ideas in my head, just haven't gotten them down on paper yet. And the next question is from Monster Blood, and he asks, what is a book that you went into with high expectations and were disappointed with? And what is a book that you weren't expecting much from but ended up loving? And both of these selections come from this year with books that I've read. So the first one is A Head Full of Ghosts by Paul Tremblay. And this book has gotten, from what I heard, nothing but positive reviews. Everyone was ranting about how good it was, and it's amazing, and you know, it's one of the best possession stories they've ever read and stuff like that. And I didn't like it, and I was very, very frustrated because I was going through and I wasn't really enjoying it. I had a lot of opinions. And then I was like, I sure hope the ending is worth reading all of this, and it wasn't. And so I was just so frustrated with that book. But of course, that comes down to personal taste. I was just, you know, kind of wondering why no one else, from what I saw, no one else had negative opinions about it. So that one was a little bit frustrating for me. And the other book is one that you weren't expecting much from but ended up loving. And I have to say that Take Your Turn Teddy by Haley Newland, and she very kindly sent me this book as an ARC. And you know, it's not that I wasn't expecting a whole lot out of it, it's just that I was very surprised that I enjoyed it as much as I did. This book is probably going to be on like my favorites list of the year. I loved the writing style, I loved the story, it was a really great page turner, and of course you guys know that I love anything that has to do with, you know, dealing with trauma and PTSD and stuff like that, and it was just ticking all the boxes for me. So it wasn't that I wasn't expecting a whole lot from it, I was just really surprised at how much I did enjoy it. So if you haven't read Take Your Turn Teddy, I highly recommend that one. And the next question comes from Pax Panic, and she asks, what is a book that you think the whole world should read? And because it was in reaching distance, I grabbed it, and it's this book, My Dark Vanessa. So this was my #1 read out of 2020. I loved this book, but it sawed me in half. It's so gut-wrenching and it's so hard to read, but I think more people need to understand grooming and what sexual assault and RAPE means when it's not kind of the conventional way that you think of it, and what goes on in a victim's mind and how they think about things and how they sort of twist and manipulate things in their mind to make it seem like this was not a bad situation when it really was. And this book has so many layers, and I really think it's worth everyone reading so that they can have full understanding of the different layers that are part of an assault, and especially in this situation where you have a young girl and an older teacher and all of the grooming that happened and the way that he manipulated her and all of that kind of stuff. Because in our society, we are way too concerned with victim blaming and trying to make things positive, or not positive, but you know, say that, okay, this wasn't actually assault, it was something else, or she consented and she didn't. And we were talking, my mom and I were talking about a specific case the other day, and we were talking about the level of victim blaming that goes on. And you know, these people are just broken for the rest of their lives. They're never going to be able to go back to the way things were before. and no amount of therapy is going to fix that. And I mean, I myself have had my own situations with someone who took advantage, and I think this is probably the best book that I've read that really goes through all of those layers of an assault that's not conventional. And you can have a million things going through your mind, and it's like, but this happened, and you're like, but I don't know if that was right, was that wrong? And I think it really would start a lot of people having really valuable conversations, really valuable debates, and hopefully, you know, you would go in and do your own research. And especially when you're talking about things like coercive control and domestic violence and all of that, it opens up this whole floodgate. And so I think this is a fantastic book. It is a very controversial book because, of course, it is so detailed and it's so graphic, but it's something that I think, if you can take the subject matter, that you should read objectively and then use it as a catalyst to do your own research into things and make sure that you have a full understanding of what people experience that go through these kinds of situations. And the next question is from Juan from Plagued by Visions, and he asks, what is your favorite decoration in that beautiful bookshelf of yours? And thank you so much, Juan. And I have to say that these replica Harry Potter potions that I got are my absolute favorite. And unfortunately, this company is now defunct. They are no more, so you can't get these potions anymore, and I'm kicking myself for not ordering more when I ordered these ones, because now of course you can't get them. So unfortunately, they had to close down because of copyright infringement, because they were copying somebody else's potions, another company's potions that were doing them. But I gotta say, I think I like theirs a lot better. And these potions came with like certificates of authentication and all of that kind of stuff because they're collector's items. So the first one, this is the replica of the Draft of Living Death, which of course they brew in, I think it's the Half-Blood Prince. So here we have, it's a beautiful glass bottle. This is very, very heavy, and it has a cork and a wax seal on top. This gorgeous label on the front with skulls and another wax seal here on the side. And then it has a little charm of a kind of a raven skull, and this little one on the side is an antidote for the Draft of Living Death. And I love these potions. Like I said, it's very heavy. It's filled with a very viscous fluid, and I love these because not only do they look absolutely spectacular, but they look even better when you let them get a little dusty. So when I clean off the shelves and dust everything, I don't touch these, and I'm just letting it kind of build up, and it gives this whole ambiance to the shelves. And this other one that I have is from the same company, and this is Wolfsbane potion. So again, we have a gorgeous wax seal on the front with this beautiful vintage looking label and another wax seal on top. And then if you turn it around, so again, this is filled with a blue fluid, and it has the Wolfsbane flower. Of course, it's just plastic, but the Wolfsbane flower replica inside. And I love these potion bottles. They were not cheap. I had to order them from the UK, so with shipping and everything, they were quite expensive. But again, they just look so spectacular on the shelves here, and I just wish that I could have gotten more of these. So I think those are my favorite decorations. And it looks like that's everything. It looks like that's all of the questions that we got. So there you guys go. That is a little bit about me. Thank you so much for submitting your questions, and of course, thank you so much for the continued support. It's not about subscribers on this channel, of course, with most of us that are in kind of this niche horror tube group. It's not about the subscribers, it's about the books. but it's also about growing our community. And you know, I just love that we have so many like-minded people that can get together and just nerd out about horror, and it's absolutely fantastic. So again, thank you guys so much, and of course give me a thumbs up and leave me a question or a comment down below, because you know I love chatting with you guys. But until next time, stay spooky everybody. Bye.